So one of the habits I learned as a student is to essentially burn yourself out over the semester. You're probably pretty destroyed by the end of the semester, and then you have these long periods of time, whether that's winter break or summer break, where if not you're like recuperating, then even if you're working or something, you're still doing something that's like not the same as what you were doing before in terms of the school year. And so you sort of get your energy back and then you feel revived, hopefully, for the next semester. That pattern really does not work well as an adult when you only have weeks, maybe days for most people of paid vacation time. And unfortunately, it's pretty uncommon or uncomfortable in like high performing careers to go to your, middle-aged or boomer boss and be like, hey, I want to take a month off because I'm feeling sad. Like, it would be really cool if we could do that, but that is not what capitalism wants from you. So I want to start by telling a little bit of story of my burnout experience, which I experienced a lot in my first year of working. And this was probably the worst case of burnout in my life, which is why I'm using this example. So my first year of working full time, I burnt out like 3 times. And the last one was the real like kicker that inspired me to learn anything about this topic. So the first 2 burnouts don't really matter, but I'll give you an example of what it felt like. And that is, I really wanted to like escape from what I was doing. By the way, this is very detached from actually the quality of my life or my job, because arguably this entire time I've known I have an amazing job and I have an amazing quality of life. But you can still feel that way and be really burnt out, and you can still feel that way and want to escape. And so I, would like essentially daydream about not having to work anymore. And I was all about like, we're not born to work, and maybe we aren't. But the point is, I was really trying to escape the reality that I felt absolutely trapped in. And by my 3rd cycle of burnout, which really happened in November, what I did not realize was that even if your mind thinks you're okay and you're still getting work done, your body keeps the score, which is this great book that people keep recommending to me, and I seriously need to read it. Even if you think you are convincing yourself that you're fine, your body probably knows. And so I also think your body is going to go after you when it comes to burnout in a way that is most offensive to you. So the way that is most offensive to me is it really messed with my sleep. As someone who has considered themselves a great sleeper their entire life, never pulled an all-nighter in high school, never pulled an all-nighter in college, I was like a 9 hours of sleep type of gal, I suddenly experienced 2 weeks of extreme insomnia. And let me tell you, day 1, coffee, sure, whatever. Day 2, coffee, sure, whatever. Day 3, coffee, but you're kind of tired. By day 14 of having 1 to a few hours of sleep a night, you are terrified of sleep. You are absolutely a walking shell of a human being. You can't keep a straight thought in your head, and you think that this might last forever. Like, you're both fearful of sleep and also think that this might be the rest of your life. And so I essentially called it quits. Didn't quit my life, I didn't quit my job. But I did take a week of sick leave, which I was really lucky to have. I left New York, so the city that I was in, and I had a lease and everything, and I just went back home, which I was really lucky to be able to do, in Canada, where it's much more quiet and peaceful. And I just took a week off where I just like watercolored, and I learned about sleep therapy, and I like did a whole sleep journey thingy, which I actually made a video about because I think a lot of people have dealt with insomnia before. After that week, I went back to work, and I was still doing my work and I was doing my emails, and I probably seemed totally normal and fine to an outside viewer, but I wasn't necessarily fully my full of life self, in that I wasn't the most creative, I wasn't the most productive, I wasn't the most passionate, etc. And I only realized this like 5 months later. So like 5 months later, I was like, wow, I'm feeling really motivated in my job, I'm feeling really good, I have all these cool ideas. And then reflecting on the previous 4 months, I was like, wow, burnout is not even like a you burn out and then you heal sort of thing. Burnout is like you burn out and then you probably are still operating because you still have a job or you still have responsibilities, but it takes a really, really long time, for me at least like 3 or 4 months in this case, to fully go back to your, passionate, full of life self. And in a lot of ways, like the rest of that time, you're sort of operating at a minimum to get by. Okay, so point of all of this is that burnout really sucks, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced it. And while I'm not a master at how you heal from burning out, I have, a lot of little things that I've learned over the years on how to deal with it and how to avoid it. So that's what we're going to discuss. By the way, I want to categorize stress a little bit. The one side being like instance-based stress, as in like there is a situation or instance that's making you stressed, and another one is just when there's like an undercurrent of stress that follows you around in life. In terms of instance-based stress, some examples I want to give are like maybe something at work is really stressing you out. Work stress for me is often about identity. It's about my work being a reflection of who I am. And so, for example, when work goes poorly, is that a reflection that I'm not capable enough, that I am not good at my job, that I will never be great at my job, etc., etc.? I find work stress to be about identity often. Maybe you are stressed out about something at school. This was also often for me tied to identity. Am I inherently not as smart as I think? Am I not as smart as the people around me? Am I deserving of being here? Do I deserve to be somewhere else? All of these things were secretly what like a school stress was often about to me. And then there's, of course, relationship-based stress. If it's a romantic relationship-based stress, I do think identity often plays a big role in this. Am I the type of person that deserves to be loved? Am I the type of person that deserves to be treated this way? But also any sort of relationship-based stress, I think, is about connection. And whenever connection, whether to your family, to your friends, to your SO, whatever, is threatened, I think it really just like causes stress because it freaks out our life. And then as it pertains to like undercurrent-based stress, I just want to acknowledge that we have all gone through like an unbelievable amount of hell and stress over our lifetimes. For example, these are just a smattering of some of the things that we have all dealt with, and I want to verbalize it because I want to know that you have experienced this too, and my goodness, I can't believe we are here. And that we're still trying to live our normal lives. So we are still going through a pandemic, but we've also been going through an acute once in a lifetime, once in 100 years pandemic. We have been through so many economic crises. Like I was born prior to the internet crises. I remember 2008. I remember various oil crises. And of course, we are currently in a period of really high inflation. People keep talking about the recession and the economy. That is really stressful. We are also in a period of war. The first time that there has been war in Europe since World War II. We are in a world with nuclear wars. So in addition, also obviously Roe v. Wade was just overturned, and we've had really extreme politics and people that have disappointed us and a lot of nihilism. We have TikTok and social media and things that constantly make us feel super inadequate and hollow inside. So yes, if you are a person living through this era, you fully not deserve, but I completely understand why you have been dealing with a lot of undercurrent of stress, probably a feeling that you always live with. I don't have a solution to that, but I'm sorry, and I feel that too. And here is a space for us to discuss ways to exist given both of these types of stress that really do exist in our lives. Okay, so now going over 7 ways to deal with or push away stress/burnout. I am not a pro, but I have stressed a lot and I have learned all of these things, and hopefully it'll be useful. Okay, the first thing is, by the way, I have a friend who's in medical school, and I was asking him about, like various health things, and he was like, honestly, there are very basic things that by and large make up like all of our health problems. Stress, I'm including in this. And those are just making sure that you sleep enough. So I sleep 9 hours a day, pretty much always, and I don't let people interrupt that. Eating well, I cook most of my meals at home. Working out, I pay someone to help train me because I am someone who needs to be watched. And so paying a personal trainer is really useful for me, but essentially working out is the other big one. And then drinking water. I'm actually really bad at this, but there was once in my life that I was really good at this when I used an app called Plant Nanny. I'll just link it for you guys. But yeah, sleep, eating, working out, water. These are probably the basis of like your health. And if something sucks, make sure that those 4 things are in order. The second thing is you need to be able to identify where you are in the burnout cycle / your current stress level. That involves having space and time to reflect and genuinely ask yourself, how am I doing? So for example, my stress or my burnout cycles often look like this. I get super burnt out and then I crash. And then I'm really low, and then maybe I'm doing the bare minimum, and then I kind of get stressed out again, etc. And then my stress level, let's say if it's from here to here, honestly, right now I'm kind of on the higher end of the stress level, but because I've identified this, I can then look at my other steps and say, okay, how do I tackle that? But if you can't identify where you are on your burnout cycle / stress level, then none of these other tips are gonna work. The third tip is taking space and time, and I kind of want to add an asterisk to this because obviously we know that this is the right answer, but this is actually very hard to do, and I will acknowledge that. If you're really stressed out and you're like, I can't, take a break right now, I'm gonna take a break a month from now, I promise you, at some point you will burn out and you will be forced to take a break because your body will literally shut off regardless of what your mind wants you to do. Another thing I want to note is to make sure you're not using time off as a crutch for not looking at the underlying issues as to why you're stressed. So that's something I do a lot where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna take a few days off and then feel better. That's what happened in my first 2 burnout cycles, by the way. I took a few days off and then I thought I felt better, but really I was like ratcheting up my stress level and going up and up on my burnout cycle. So definitely you need space and time, but also you need to address the underlying issues. Fourth, okay, this is actually a tip, which is the number one thing I learned from my first year's 3 burnout experience was boundary setting. Boundary setting has been the most useful thing to me this year, which essentially says in your head, this doesn't necessarily change your output, but in your head, you have a sense of how much you're going to let certain things take as a percentage of your life. So for example, I might say, work is only going to get 80% of my life. The other 20% is always going to be mine. You might say as a student, school is only going to get 50% of my life this semester, and that's just it. Another way you can use this is, let's say you had a bad day and tomorrow you have school again or you have work again or whatever. You might say to yourself, I had a crappy night. School / work is only going to get 20% of my day tomorrow. It's not something that you necessarily tell other people, but setting boundaries on certain parts of your life gives you more space in your life or space in your life back to be the full person that you want to be and put time and energy into other things that you think are important. Fifth tip is figuring out a way to find peace. So for me, one of the best ways to find peace is to have a routine. I'm really lucky that in my work, I travel a lot. I think it's really fun and awesome. But I find that when I travel too much, it takes away from my routine, and my routine is where I find peace. And so, for example, I might say no to some travel opportunities or obligations even because I need to maintain my routine, to maintain my sanity, and your number one responsibility is to maintain yourself and your sanity. Another example of this is I really benefit productivity-wise from actually going to the office versus working at home. This is a routine that I know works for me and helps me find inner peace. And so prioritizing that is very useful. This might be different per person, but essentially you need to find the things that bring you peace. Sixth and really amazing tip that I actually really recently just learned because someone who has a very expensive therapist was telling me about this, essentially asking yourself, how does the stress serve you? It often feels like the stress doesn't serve you because you're like, what do you mean? I'm stressed and I don't want to be. But actually, most of the time when we do things as human beings, it's because it secretly serves us, even if we don't want to admit that it serves us. So let me give you an example with 4 things that I'm currently experiencing that currently cause me stress. And I'm going to give you an example of how this stress associated with it actually serves me, or at least why I think it serves me. Sometimes it actually does, stress does actually serve you in some way, and sometimes it's illogical, but in either case, there's probably a logic as to why you're being stressed because you think it'll help you with something. So first example, for work, I was planning this big event. Don't ask how I ended up being stuck planning this event, but I was planning this event, and if I asked myself, how does being stressed about it serve me? I think the reason is because I'm sort of insecure at work about not being detail-oriented, so I think I mistakenly believed that by being stressed, I was going to convince myself to somehow be more detail-oriented. Now, I don't think this is actually all that logical, but a solution to this is to actually just write a checklist for things that I need to accomplish for the event and then otherwise not feel so stressed about it. So that's an example of something I'm stressed about. If I ask myself, how does the stress serve me? I get to an answer, and then I actually find a solution to lessen my stress by getting to the core of how I think the stress serves me and fixing that with something else as opposed to trying to fix it with the stress. The second example is I'm trying to help a member of my family with a task that they need to get done essentially, and I'm really stressed on behalf of them. And I ask myself, how does the stress serve me? I believe that the stress serves as a reminder to me and as a way to take away the emotional labor from them. But what I mean by reminder is I think the stress causes me to bring it up, and then I'm like, oh, I need to remember to do that. And I'm taking the emotional burden away from them because I don't want them to shoulder the stress, so I feel like I should shoulder the stress. Now, is that logical? Probably not. So what's my solution to solve this like underlying, or to take on the role of how the stress serves me without being stressed, is I'm going to set up an alarm that reminds me about this task on like a weekly basis or something. So instead of trying to use stress to do that, I'm literally going to use technology to do that. Third example of this is I'm working on some deals for work and I feel very stressed and passionate about it. So I ask myself, why does the stress serve me? And I think it's because I associate stress with being productive and being a busy person. And so because I want to identify as a busy and productive person at work, doing all these cool deals, then therefore I am stressed. Does that make sense again? No. And so how do I logic my way out of this? Well, I say what I'm actually trying to be is productive, and I know the routines that make me productive. This stress does not add on to my productivity. In fact, it actually takes away from my productivity because it causes me to freeze. And so now that I've worked through this logic, I know where my logic doesn't make sense. And I also remind myself that being a busy, productive person does not equate to being a stressed person, despite the fact that our hustle and grind culture makes it seem that way. The fourth example of this is being really stressed about the state of the world. It feels like there are all of these maybe political or global or world or national issues that are weighing on the average person's shoulders. But then I ask myself, how does the stress serve me? And I think the way it serves me is I want to seem, in terms of my own identity and how I see myself, like a compassionate person, like someone who is not nihilistic about the state of the world, someone who is empathetic and aware of what's going on globally. So I think the stress actually does serve me because it helps me maintain this identity. But then when I go through that logic, I'm like, well, being really stressed doesn't help me be a better world citizen. It doesn't help solve any of these issues. So that's actually very logical. I can maintain this identity of being someone who cares about the world without being like a super big stress ball all the time, because clearly that is not serving anyone. So those are 4 examples of how asking this question, how does my stress serve me, and answering really honestly helps you get to the root of how you are actually benefiting from stress, and then hopefully getting those benefits and maintaining those benefits, but without the stress piece. So the 7th tip for helping with your stress is being more compassionate to yourself. Now, this is something I personally suck at because I am personally a very tough love person. That's often how I treat the people around me, and that is 100% how I treat myself. I never let myself rest on my laurels. I'm always like, there's more to do. But I think one of the myths that I hold that makes it hard for me to be compassionate towards myself is I often associate being compassionate with myself as lying to myself or pretending that I'm better than I am. What I mean by that is, if I was to say, hey Mary, if you think about it reasonably, you're actually doing really well, or you're actually a really great person, I'm like, you're just lying to yourself. You're not telling the truth. You're not being grounded. And I can prove that doesn't make any sense, because if you think of yourself as a friend, so just imagine that you were a friend and your friend is telling you about your problems, how would you respond to them? You would probably respond to them with a lot of compassion. And it's not because you are lying to them, it's actually what you believe is actually the truth. And if you were just as friendly to yourself as you were to other people, that is one of the ways that you can be more compassionate towards yourself. So actually I shot a vlog, but it really sucked. And so that's why this video is coming up a little bit late. Also, I have a video genre that I'm kind of interested in exploring in future videos. It is the video essay genre. Dum dum dum. But yeah, anyways, if you have video tip suggestions or something you do or don't like about the format or the things I talk about, let me know. I really, really appreciate that you guys spend any time at all watching and commenting. It's amazing. And yeah, see you in my next video.